Houston is at a crossroads, and our next mayor will face challenges and opportunities that will determine Houston's future and place in the pantheon of great American cities. I'm Jim Granado, Dean of the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston. Welcome to Your Houston, Your Vote, the 2023 City of Houston Mayoral Debate. It is presented by the Hobby School in partnership with Houston Public Media and Univision Houston. Tonight's moderator is Houston Public Media's Christina Lee.
Good evening, and welcome to Your Houston, Your Vote, the 2023 Mayoral Debate presented by the University of Houston, Hobby School of Public Affairs, Houston Public Media, and Univision. Coming to you from the Houston Public Media Studios, I'm your moderator, Christina Lee. Tonight, we've invited 6 candidates to join us to help Houstonians cast an informed vote in the coming weeks. This could be the last debate you watch before you cast your vote, since early voting starts Monday and Election Day is November 7th. Tonight's candidates were chosen based on the latest Hobby School of Public Affairs poll, where at least 2% of likely voters intend to vote for them, or a minimum of 8% would definitely consider doing so. All the candidates we've invited are here tonight, except for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who had to decline at the last minute to stay at the Capitol for the House Speaker race. Now, for the rules of the debate. The candidates will be asked questions by our panel of journalists: Houston Public Media senior political reporter Andrew Schneider, Univision 45 news anchor Marcela Perez-Barros, and University of Houston student John Lomax, editor-in-chief of The Cougar. In each round, one candidate will be asked a question and get 60 seconds to respond, followed by 30-second rebuttals. In some rounds, the question will be directed at all of the candidates, and they'll each get 60 seconds to respond, followed by 30-second rebuttals. The rounds will continue until each candidate has had a turn to give the first response, and if time permits, we will have rapid-fire questions that allow for 10-second responses. Candidates, you will know your time is up from the running clock before you, as well as a timekeeper who will ring a bell. Finally, as your moderator, my job is to keep us on time so that we can get in as many questions as possible, which means I will also be interrupting when your time is up. Now, let's meet the candidates. You each have 1 minute for opening remarks, and we will begin in alphabetical order from the left with former Houston City Council member Jack Christie. 1 minute, sir.
Good. Citizens of Houston, you have an important vote to have in the coming weeks. You are picking the leader that will lead this city, that can be this greatest city in America. That candidate needs to have a great bio to know the health and the education and the welfare of the taxpayer, and that's part of my platform. I went on the Spring Branch School Board at age 28. When I was president of the board, we were picked the most outstanding school board in the state of Texas. Then I went on to the State Board of Education. George W. Bush put me as chairman. We raised the standards in the schools, and the high school diploma means a lot more. Then I went to at-large position city council for 8 years, worked with 2 mayors, and I think I had perfect attendance in all 22 years of public service. I have the bio, I have the energy, I want to be your next mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Houston City Council member Robert Gallegos.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Councilmember Robert Gallegos. Out of the candidates that are running for mayor, I'm the one with the experience. I've been on city council for the past 10 years. I've worked with 2 mayors, Mayor Parker as well as Mayor Turner. I'm proud of my record. You can go to voterobertgallegos.com. I'm also chair of Quality of Life, a vice chair of Economic Development, and former chair of Regulation and Neighborhood Affairs. Prior to being a council member, I was a community leader and a community organizer for 30-some years in the East End and District I. I also was president of my civic club for 15 years. I was also the founder and first president of Eastwood Lawndale Wayside Super Neighborhood. I say all that because I just didn't wake up one day and say I'm running for mayor. I've earned my stripes. I've been out there. I know what the issues are. I am ready on day one to be the next mayor of the city of Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. And now former Metro Chair Gilbert Garcia.
Thank you very much. My name is Gilbert Garcia, and Houstonians, just like you, because of the Hobby Center poll, we now know the majority of you feel like Houston is going in the wrong direction. And I can see why. If you look, the city of Houston, it works for certain people. It works for the government insiders, it works for the lobbyists, it works for the career politicians, but it's not working for everyday Houstonians. Whether you look, whether it's the potholes that we've been dealing with for seems decades, whether it's the firefighters who still do not have a contract, whether it's the raid on the health department, the raid on the housing department, whether it's the really strange procurement with the Hobby airport concession, you could go on and on, whether it's the indictments within City Hall, whether it's we got to boil our water. At the end of the day, we need something different. We need an outsider. We need someone with no conflicts of interest. We need someone with a business background to shake up City Hall, to make sure City Hall works for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And Attorney Lee Kaplan.
Thank you. I'm Lee Kaplan. I'm running to make Houston a greater city for everyone. Everyone. And my plan is to focus on the most important issues as I have confirmed them from talking to thousands of people. Crime, getting more officers out on the street and in the communities. Picking up the garbage everywhere. Infrastructure, which means long-range work on infrastructure and not just filling potholes. And finally, affordable housing, starting with timely permitting. So why me? Well, my experience is different. It's a small businessman who founded a firm which has grown to 10 times its former size based on competence, accountability, and integrity. And the last is critical. I'm a real political outsider. I haven't been in public office for years and years, not solving our problems. I want to be your mayor, not the mayor of the lobbyists.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. And now Texas Senator John Whitmire.
Thank you first to the hosts that bring us together today. And to the U of H students, I was a U of H student when I started my public service. I was a senior in 1972, saw a district that I could get elected in, went and knocked doors. The public elected me as a public servant in 1972, probably at about the same age of our students present today. I've had a distinguished public service record in the House and the Senate. I chair the Criminal Justice Committee. I was asked by Houstonians to consider running for mayor. I weighed it very carefully. I'm making a difference in Austin, but I was also concerned about the condition of Houston. We have a great city, great people, but our expectations of City Hall are not being met. I will use my experience working across the aisle to bring people together to deal with our infrastructure and a variety of issues that we'll discuss today. But if we do not solve public safety, probably nothing else we talk about today matters.
Thank you, Senator. And now we turn to our panel for the first question, which is posed to all of the candidates.
Crime is on voters' minds. Despite Houston police data showing that crime is down, the University of Houston's Hobby School of Public Affairs just released its newest survey showing 82% of likely Houston voters say crime is their #1 concern. They believe the best way to tackle crime is hiring an additional 600 police officers and rank dead last bringing in state troopers. Do you believe this is the way to tackle crime? And if so, how do we pay for it?
Thank you, Andrew. And we will start responses from the left with Jack Christie. You have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. That priority is definitely the priority that we have. For 8 years on City Council, I at-large member, I asked for 500 more police. We have the same number of police that we did 13 years ago, and yet the population has increased 500,000 people. The police department, with the crime down recently, have done an unbelievable job over time, and we've got a good police chief, a great police force. But we needed those 500 8 years ago. I fought for it then, but as mayor, I can get you 500 more police by being a fiscal conservative on the budget. We're spending much more than we're taking in, and that is wrong, and I will hold the line and get the money to hire 500 more police.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Now, Mr. Gallegos, again, the question was crime and voters asking for more Houston police officers. Do you agree, and how would you pay for this?
Yesterday, Chief Finner gave a report at council before council started in regards to crime. Crime has gone down compared to last year. Is it perfect? No, it's not. In regards to hiring more police officers, Chief Finner, he would prefer if we could have 1,000 officers, but if we can at least get 500 more officers would be great. In regards to how we're going to pay for it, we have a revenue cap. Voters voted on that back in 2004. It was implemented in 2018. Since 2018, the city has not collected $1.8 billion. That's $1.8 billion. As the next mayor, what I will do is work with the finance director as well as the next controller to educate the public so that way it can go back on the ballot, and it will be up to the voters to decide if they want to repeal the revenue cap. But again, that's $1.8 billion. It saves the average homeowner maybe $150 a year. I personally would give back $150 if I know I'm going to have more police officers on the street and new trash trucks to pick up the trash.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. Mr. Garcia.
Sure. A couple of things. It'll take time to integrate 500 police officers, to hire them, put them through the cadet class and everything else. My view is we should hire more civilians to do the jobs that right now police officers are doing that are civilian work. That will free up police officers to do more policing. I also think we need enhanced street lighting in areas that are high crime, that are relatively dark. And I think we need to bring back and expand more storefront policing. The DPS idea, that's one of the ideas, of course, of the senator. That has to be one of the worst ideas I can think of. We know what the DPS is doing there on the border. We know that they're pushing women and children back into barbed wire. That's what they're saying. We know what they're doing in Austin, where they're racially profiling people of color, primarily Hispanics and African Americans. We don't need DPS. We don't need to militarize our city. We just need to be smarter. We need to think about creative ways, and I believe there's a better alternative.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Kaplan.
The mayor commissioned a study for $775,000 at the beginning of his 2 terms. And that's a study by a group that studies cities, how they can be more efficient. The most important recommendation was to civilianize more functions because many police officers are in the buildings, not on the streets. Community policing, which Lee Brown brought in, is a great idea, but you have to have police to do it. We can't just hire 500 more people next year. We'd be sending out 22-year-olds with inadequate training. What we have to do is start by getting more people in the street and into the substations where we already have them. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is to get rid of the gun buyback program, which is boneheaded. And the third thing is for the mayor to really support the police in a way that's more than just attending funerals.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Senator Whitmire, to you the crime question, considering that survey respondents ranked your proposal to bring in state troopers dead last.
Thanks for the question. As chairman of criminal justice, I'm uniquely qualified to handle this issue. The misrepresentation of the use of the DPS is unfortunate. What we need with the DPS is to work with Chief Finner, and they're already in Houston. I can document that they're working with HPD now. We need their resources. We need their anti-gang task force. We need to free up HPD to be in our neighborhoods. We have very little traffic enforcement. We need to get after the DWIs. We could use DPS to complement HPD under HPD's direction. We need their helicopters. We need their forensics. We need their anti-gang activities. I can't imagine someone that would criticize as badly as we need additional resources. We obviously got to recruit. If you do that successfully, you don't need outside law enforcement. But they are our state police. They're trained. They are in Houston today. But mostly we need their resources and money to attack crime in Houston.
Thank you, Senator. Now we open up the floor for any rebuttals or responses.
I think I would just say that's boneheaded. The gun buyback is boneheaded. We need visibility. I knew as a young man, don't speed on 610 or the Southwest Freeway. That's not the case anymore. The only way in the short term that we increase our police force is by using it wisely. In the longer run, we can recruit more people. But we simply cannot have 500 more cops on the street in less than 2 years. Crime is actually up.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan.
Well,
Anyone else? Yes.
I would welcome DPS's money and resources. Don't get me wrong. If they're willing to send money down here for us to increase our law enforcement efforts, I'm willing to take their money and I'm willing to take their resources. I just don't want to see this city become militarized. I don't want to see what's happening in the Valley happen in Houston. And I don't want to see people of color being racially profiled.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Yes, Mr. Gallegos.
I too oppose state troopers in the city. State troopers are trained to be rural police officers, not urban police officers, and that's opening the gates for situations where they may be doing things here in the city of Houston that they're not trained to do.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. Yes, Mr. Christie.
And remember what I said earlier, that for the full 8 years I was on city council, I asked for 500 more police. You can stagger them over the eight years and have 500 more police. Same way I did with opioids. I warned them for 8 years that that's part of crime, and they didn't stop opioids back then. It would have saved a lot of lives if they listened to me back then.
All right. Thank you. Now let's go back to our... Yes, Senator, please.
First of all, there are 15,000 correction officers across Texas. I know for a fact I could get 500 of them to come to Houston and work. In terms of the DPS, they're here now. It's amazing that as serious as we are about solving crime, we don't look for additional resources. The real serious problem is we have repeat violent offenders that are being released back to the streets of Houston, which I hope we get to discuss later. But we have to hold violent offenders accountable, help the nonviolent change their lives.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, gentlemen. Now let's go back to our panel. John Lomax for the second question.
Mr. Garcia, your main experience with local government has been as Metro Chairman. In UH's new survey, 67% of likely voters describe poor road and street conditions as tied with economy and jobs as the #2 problem facing Houston's next mayor. How would you fix our roads and pay for it?
First, it really goes back to the very essence of most of the troubles that we have in Houston. We have a real issue with City Hall. It's an issue of incompetence. We've got to get a business mindset to go in there and really shake it up. If you look, there's something wrong when you have the health department raided by the FBI, the housing department raided by the district attorney, the housing department having to give back a $50 million grant from HUD that was meant for affordable housing when we need desperately affordable housing. There's something wrong when you have insiders at City Hall indicted for bribery and already pled guilty. There's something very, very wrong when you still don't have a contract with the firefighters. At the end of the day, I think we need a whole different shakeup of City Hall. We need a whole different redo to look at all the departments to see what can be consolidated, because there's clearly money slipping through the cracks. If the lobbyists and so forth, other insiders are making money that's not going to roads and to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Anyone for a response or a rebuttal?
All I would say is fixing potholes is not the answer. Kathy Whitmire was a prophet without honor in her own country here because she initiated long-range street improvements, which of course meant drainage, because you take up the street and repair the drainage. That was years and years ago. Those streets have gotten into the end of their useful life. We should use the drainage fee the way it was pitched to the citizenry, not the way it was written so as to give the administration too much wiggle room.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes, Senator.
You have to make it a priority, and you have to look outside the norm. We need to partner with the county. We need to let the county know that as we talk today, we're standing in Harris County. There's no reason we can't use additional county resources, partner with the city of Houston to deal with our infrastructure. Also look to management districts and TERS to do their part. We've got to find additional resources and make our infrastructure, including water, one of our highest priorities.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Christie.
When I first joined City Council at large, it was with Mayor Parker. But when Mayor Turner came on, that was a priority. And I agree with the other candidates that said it should be a priority. We took 30-day response time down to 3 days. I sat atop an asphalt truck and was seeing how we did it. It is not a priority now, and it should be. And again, I agreed with another one of the candidates that said we shouldn't drain money away from the streets and roads.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos.
As council member, I've worked with both commissioners, Rodney Ellis as well as Adrian Garcia, who represent District I, in regards to partnerships. We have limited resources, and therefore they brought up county monies. For example, Oaks Road, that's a project that the city has not been able to do due to the funding. But I worked with Adrian Garcia, Commissioner Garcia, and we were able to resurface Oaks Road. And also expanding the TERS. I was able to expand the Harrisburg TERS as well as the Gulfgate TERS, so that way there'll be more revenue coming into the city for these projects.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos.
I guess there's no rebuttals?
There isn't. I apologize. Let's return to our panel for the third question, which will be for all of the candidates. Again, you will each have 1 minute to answer this question.
The new UH survey ranks economy and jobs as tied for second place among the leading problems likely voters say the next mayor should address. Within that framework, Houston's Hispanic population is particularly concerned with unemployment rates and childcare. Given the two issues are clearly related, how do you plan to boost job opportunities for this community while also providing affordable childcare for Hispanic population?
This time we will start from the right with Senator Whitmire.
First, you have to be sensitive to the communities that are underserved. One of my real concerns, and one of the reasons to run for mayor, is I'm alarmed by we're having two Houstons, not only in daycare or affordable housing, but almost nearly every service. You know, infrastructure. Denver Harbor wants their first sidewalk. I go over into the Heights, Washington area, they're tearing up perfectly good 3-foot sidewalks for 8-foot sidewalks. It's just an example of the disparity across our city. So one, we have to unite people, which I have a record of doing, and also make everyone buy into our problems. You can't have people that are living well not understand how we all live affects everyone. Those are our workers, our employees, our friends. So what we have to do is make all Houstonians buy into the situation that you just described. I want people that are doing well to realize we've got people that barely make it with their affordable housing lacking, and also the daycare.
Thank
and
you,
look
Senator.
for jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Kaplan, again, the question is economy and jobs and Houston's Hispanic community looking for solutions to unemployment and child care. You also have 1 minute, sir.
Well, Professor Kleinberg's book called The Prophetic City is one that highlights the need for education. That's the first thing. The mayor doesn't really control that, but, and people don't realize this, Lone Star College and Houston Community College have together 160,000 students a year in all kinds of specialties. So that's the first thing, is helping people get jobs. By the way, the city's website sucks. It sucks. And if you've ever tried to navigate it, and I have, without help, it's virtually impossible. And that's the first thing. We've got to expand the opportunities. The second thing we have to do is tell the private sector, you have to employ people. I've represented people and companies ranging from ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips to indigent defendants and plaintiffs who had very little in the way of resources. And child care is a critical issue. If you live in River Oaks or Tanglewood, not much trouble there, but elsewhere we have to have more.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Garcia.
Sure. The Hispanic community needs to be one of the #1 priorities for the next mayor. Why? Because it's roughly half the city. Where the Hispanic community goes, so will the Houston's future go. That is the future workforce of the city. We've got to get them educated, we got to get them mentored, we got to get them into the middle class, and we need to help them build and create wealth. As it relates to sort of the other issues about your question, it really goes back to the competency of City Hall. Because right now there are companies that are leaving high-tax states and they're moving to Texas, but they're not moving to Houston. That should be sounding alarm bells. They're moving to Dallas, they're moving to Austin. Further, if you look, the population is growing all around Houston, whether it's Brazoria County, the unincorporated parts of the county, whether it is Missouri City, Humboldt, Katy, you name it. But we're not growing in Houston anymore. In fact, the last 3 years, the city of Houston has shrunk about 1.5%. We should be ringing alarm bells. The mayor should be taking the lead. That's what I would do if I were elected mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Councilmember Gallegos.
I'm the only Latino on City Council. I've been on City Council for 10 years. The last 8 years, I've been the only Latino representing District I. I'm proud that I joined Mayor Turner in the ribbon cutting of the East End Maker Hub there off of Navigation. It's a 300,000 square foot warehouse where basically it helps in regards to technology, medical, and fabrication training for individuals. Also, we're looking at hopefully within the next 5 years, 1,000 businesses can open up because we're providing those services. And that was funded by the federal government. Also, as the next mayor, what I would like to do is provide child care at that facility so that way those that are going for training can also leave their kids, knowing that they can leave their kids there at daycare at this facility. The HISD is 62% Hispanic. We need to make sure that we provide education for the Hispanic community. Otherwise, that will impact the city of Houston in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. Mr. Christie.
When I first ran for city council at large, I was on the East End, and I had a nice size audience like we have here. And I said, listen, you could run the city if you register to vote and vote. 42% of the population, Hispanic. Why do we only have one good Hispanic here? He's done a good job. So this city is multicultural. It's a tossed salad of society, and we need everyone represented. So if the voters vote, they'll put in the right people, the right leaders, and this city can be great again, really, because it was on a good roll before COVID. And I think COVID divided us, and we don't get along like we used to. My job is to put people back together, get good representation, and please, as a voter, vote your conscience and vote for good people in office.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. And gentlemen, you now have 30 seconds opportunity for each of you for a rebuttal.
I would like to add health care is a priority to daycare and certainly the jobs. It's so unfortunate that there are so many Houstonians uninsured. We can't continue to have people show up in the emergency room because they didn't get primary care earlier. So there are many services, food deserts, mental health areas that are not being distributed properly. So let's just work to bring Houston together and provide the quality of life that some enjoy for all.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else?
Yeah, the city's budget is only about $7 billion. The private sector is maybe 40 times that much. It's a myth that the city can suddenly do all these things. But a mayor who has worked with people in the private sector, all the way from the energy corridor to the port, is the kind of person who can encourage them to make sure that health care options are available, child care options are available. That's what the mayor has to do, is be a leader and not just of city employees. That's one of the things that I think is critically important.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
There's a lot of discussion. The senator mentions that he's worked with 7 or 8 mayors. He says that regularly, and it's true. And he talks, of course, about Denver Harbor and the sidewalks and potholes and so forth. And please let the senator answer. You've been in the pinnacle of power for 50 years. For 50 years. Why haven't you worked with all these mayors all these years to have done something about these issues that have been going on, it seems, for decades?
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Any additional responses? Yes, Mr. Christie.
It was also mentioned in the question about child care and affordability and jobs. You know, and I think most of the business community support me because I'm very tight on the budget, and it's simple. We don't spend more than we got. We're doing that now. We're spending more than we have. With a good economy, you have more construction, you have more jobs, and you can afford the child care on your own. Jobs are available here, but we need to bring the city together to be to the next decade.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Right, let's go back to our panel, to Andrew Schneider for the 4th question.
Mr. Kaplan, you've said you're running to improve the quality of life for Houstonians. In UH's new survey, flooding ranks 3rd among the problems likely Houston voters say should be the top concern of the next mayor. Many residents, particularly lower-income residents, have suffered repeated flooding going back to Tropical Storm Allison. Given that Houston's geography makes flooding such an intractable problem, what would you do to reduce this threat?
That's one of the 4 things I talked about. As I said, Kathy Whitmire tried very hard to do something about infrastructure. We have a drainage fee. It was pitched one way, it's been administered another. Rearranging the potholes doesn't do us much good. The 18-wheelers will do that for us all on their own. The important thing is to redo streets so that the drainage underneath them, many of which are 100 years old, get repaired. And particularly in the east side. 3rd Ward, 5th Ward, and Sunnyside all have serious problems that are not shared by River Oaks and Tanglewood. And so the first thing I would do is use the drainage fee the way it's supposed to be used. We have to get the water to the bayous. The county flood control is responsible for disposing of it. And they know that. So that's the way I would attack the issue, is figure out which streets and areas flood the most frequently, and work on them first.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Any responses or rebuttals?
I would like to mention the maintenance of our drainage system. About 1/3 of our neighborhood drainage is cluttered with grass clippings, debris, so it's interfering downstream and in that neighborhood with their drainage. What we've also got to do is attack illegal dumping. I could take you to locations in Houston today. They have no drainage because the bar ditch is completely full. And I'm glad the city finally accepted their responsibility recently to keep the bar ditches clean for the neighborhood.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, Mr. Gallegos.
On City Council, we voted on the SWAT program. The SWAT program basically works with the district council member, and we then in turn work with former council member Costello, the flood czar, in regards to drainage projects that we have in our district. For example, we encourage them to go out there and actually clean up these drainage canals because, again, they have a lot of overgrown grass. They have shopping carts. They have tires. So that all gets cleaned out, and that helps in regards to the drainage, in regards to flooding.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
I agree with all three candidates, but what I'd like to add is, again, it's really a strong tone at the top that needs to be set. It took a lawsuit to really get the transparency on how the city was allocating the drainage fee. And if you look at the drainage fee, depending upon how you do the mathematics, it's either diverted $200 million from the inception, which is about a year's worth of projects, or up to $400 million since inception, which essentially would have built a whole nother reservoir. So we need much better transparency in City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Yes, Mr. Christie.
We sit maybe 5 feet above sea level, so we're always going to be vulnerable. You get 12 inches of rain, and you can do everything in the world, but there's going to be flooding. I agree with one of the other candidates talked about, don't divert the drainage fee from that budget. But also is we have 7 beautiful bios. Philanthropists have helped us, and volunteers have helped us keep those bios clean. That's important for the drainage of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. And now for our 5th question from Marcela Perez Barros.
Senator Whitmire, at least 1.5 million people have crossed our southern border over the past year as COVID-19 era restrictions ended. El Paso and other cities along the Texas southern border and major cities elsewhere, such as New York, are struggling to provide to the recent influx. How would you respond as Houston mayor if city resources are strained by new arrivals?
Well, of course, it needs to be a national policy. But until Congress can decide first if they can elect a speaker, we need leadership at the top in Washington. But you're right, the result ends up in our cities. I think we need an urban initiative. I think Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin, Houston needs to come together, go to Washington, go to Austin, and talk about the challenge of dealing with the immigrants. The immigrants are some of our best neighbors. They're in Houston. I could take you to Hillcroft and West Park on a Sunday afternoon. Hundreds, if not thousands, of immigrants are coming together with their native foods and customs. It's a beautiful sight to see. So one, we have to recognize they're our neighbors, they're our workers. Speaking to that health care that I did a moment ago, sadly, they don't have health care. They show up in an emergency room. We can do so much better. We need an ID card, which the immigrant community has asked me, maybe a library card, some way to identify their presence. I support that, and I think we can do so much better.
Thank you, Senator. Any responses? Yes, Mr. Christie.
I'm a big fan of futurists that see the future and make decisions. Sometimes they don't listen, like I've had a few times. George W. Bush is in town today. He had a plan 18 years ago to secure the border, earn your citizenship when there wasn't a problem. And earning the citizenship could have taken 8 years, but he had a plan couldn't get bipartisan support. If we were to listen to that futurist, we would not be having that problem
Thank
today.
you, Mr. Christie. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Kaplan.
People want to work. You don't cross the Darien Gap. You don't brave the snakes and the cartels if you're looking for a welfare check. And I've said that at the River Oaks Country Club, the AFL-CIO, and everywhere else. The second thing is, why is it that Bill White could welcome so many Katrina victims to Houston and we absorb them, and now we're having problems? That's leadership. It comes from the top, a welcoming attitude for people who want to work.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
I agree with the things that Senator and Lee and everybody has said. I think the key is they're human beings, they're people. And I can tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do racial profiling. I would not, I would put very difficult circumstances around any hate crimes. I would make sure that as human beings that they're not mistreated. And ultimately, it is a federal issue, and I would try to work with the federal government for them to do something on this issue that's been talked about for decades.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Anyone else for a response? Yes,
Two
Mr.
would work
Gallegos.
with our congressional delegation in order to address this through the federal government with President Biden or whoever would be president at that time. In regards to the overflow of individuals that are coming in from our southern border. But again, this is a federal issue. So again, working with our federal our delegation, our congressional delegation.
Thank you, Council Member. Let's go back to our panel for our sixth question from John Lomax.
Councilmember Gallegos. The Houston Association of Realtors reports that the cost of a median-priced home in Houston has risen nearly 58% since 2015. That means a household needs to earn almost twice as much as 8 years ago to afford a median-priced home. This has been especially hard for students and young people. How would you make sure there are enough affordable homes and rentals to go around?
City Council just recently voted on livable places. Livable places is from the planning department. We had public, meetings where individuals actually came to public session and they were giving us their opinions and what have you. But livable places is going to provide other stocks of homes, for example, allowing for garage apartments to be built in someone's home if it's allowed on the deed restrictions. Of course, if deed restrictions doesn't allow that, then that won't happen. Also in regards to fourplexes, eightplexes, also in regards to courtyard houses where they will build 4 or 5 houses around a courtyard. This is extra housing stock, so that way the prices can hopefully come down and students can also afford these new houses.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. We open the floor for any responses. Mr. Garcia?
Well, thank you, Lee. Well, 2 quick things. The first is my wife and I are building affordable housing just to learn the process, and it took us almost a year to get a permit. That is unacceptable. Why? Because permitting should be a revenue generator. We need to stabilize the neighborhoods to get the homes on the tax rolls. We need the tax revenue. And I would partner with other places and other entities like NACA. They have below market interest rates where they subsidize housing and they build wonderful quality modular homes. We need to think differently.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Yes, Mr. Kaplan.
So we've now touched on the 4 things I identified as most important: crime, picking up the garbage, permitting, and drainage. Permitting, if it takes a year and you're paying 7% interest for a bridge loan to build a house, you're in trouble. I've had developers tell me, Lee, I hate dealing with the county, but I will not deal with the city. That is nonsensical. It just creates more sprawl. So the permitting department deserves much more attention, so we know who's in charge and we solve that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes, Mr. Christie.
Let me give you a good example and a bad example. We have a lot of great nonprofits in this city, meaning they're not profiting off the taxpayer. New Hope Housing opens up these affordable houses, and they are truly affordable. And it's done with not profit in mind. We need more from New Hope Housing and similar nonprofits. The worst thing I would not do is buy a $50 million toxic waste dump and put $300,000 affordable houses on it.
Senator?
First, we have to remind the Housing Authority what their mission is: affordability. And you do not have conflicts of interest which interfere with the affordability. Also, the goal should be home ownership. There are programs through several financial institutions in Houston. If we can help renters, when you get up to rent like $2,000 a month, that's getting to a house payment. Let's have the goal to get folks in affordable housing, help them with a down payment, and allow them to have the American dream of owning their own home.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go back to our panel, to Andrew Schneider for question 7.
Mr. Christie, you highlight your experience as a former city council member in reining in Houston's pension debt. Controller Chris Brown told Houston Public Media in July that Houston may face a budget shortfall of about $300 million and needs to make deep cuts by 2025. What programs would you cut to balance the budget and still pay for your priorities as mayor?
Perfect question, because it all comes down. We can't do some of these great things unless we have a balanced budget. The whole time on city council, we did not have a balanced budget. I had to cover $260 million shortfall, $120 million shortfall. We sold off properties. The pension, I got the mayor, the conservative votes in the Senate to where it was bipartisan to reduce the pension debt from $8 billion to $3 billion. Going forward, we're facing firefighter pay, we're facing the $300 million deficit. We've got to do a hiring freeze. We've got to start balancing the budget and don't spend more than we got. It's simple. We can't expand government and run at a deficit. That's what the federal government's doing. They're putting everything on a credit card, and your children and grandchildren are going to pay for it. It'll stop with the Christie administration.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Any responses?
Sure,
Yes,
there's
Mr.
several
Kaplan.
things we can do. Number one, construction people have told me, sell some properties, lease them back. Let the private sector do the maintenance. That's one thing. Second thing is a drainage fee. We've got to consider that. Everyone else has one. Third thing is we're going to have some kind of arbitration with the firefighters. We can't let them bankrupt the city. And finally, the TERSs need limitations. At some point, a TERS has outlived its usefulness, and we have to trade the flower pots in the Post Oak area.
Thank you, Mr.
for
Kaplan.
elsewhere.
Anyone else for, yes, Senator?
I think we need to look for unnecessary spending. When we have the urgent needs that we really need for the city to spend $5 million to make the lights on 59 look pretty, I think we could take that money and put it in infrastructure, in municipal employees' salaries. We do have a challenge. We've got to remember public safety means firefighters as well. So there's a lot of better management. We need to partner with the county, maybe not have 2 park systems, 2 library systems. Why don't we come together and cut out the duplication?
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else for a response? Mr. Garcia.
I agree that we're going to be facing significant financial difficulties, and I believe that the pension issue is not solved. I think that will be the next mayor, hopefully it'll be me, will be dealing with the pension issues, particularly the municipal employee pension, in very short order. Most of their assets are not marked to market. Most of them are in alternative investments, and so there's going to be a reckoning there in very short order.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Yes, Mr. Gallegos.
In regards to my opponents, they're all claiming that they're going to find some money to get things moving, but that's not the case. There's no money out there to be found. We've been operating on ARPA funding, but ARPA funding is going to come to an end in 2025. You have firefighters that we're still negotiating. The concern with that is that in regards to retroactive, in regards to their pay raises, it was the way when they wrote the contract, it may go back to 2018, 2017 for pay raises, which the city won't be able to afford.
Thank you. Now to our 8th question from Marcela Perez Barros.
Mr. Kaplan, Houston Proposition 8 will be on the ballot for voters to decide. It would amend the city's charter to trade power from the mayor to city council, allowing them to put items on the agenda over the mayor's objection. For example, whether to impose a garbage collection fee. Would you be willing to give up some of your power as mayor?
Well, any mayor who's not consulting with several council members is going to be a failure regardless. I regard it as essentially irrelevant to me, so I will vote for it. But I don't think it's necessary because any mayor has got to listen to several council members. Part of my time running for office and preparing to was talking to Tarsha Jackson, Sally Alcorn, Tiffany Thomas, Mike Knox, who's now term limited. And every time I asked, what do we do about these things? I also read the budget. all the way through and looked at all the memos that Sally sent whenever somebody increased an amount by $20,000 or decreased it. So I think, of course, you consult with council members. At my law firm, we have many partners, names ranging from Adler and Zilberman to Robles and Chavez. And we consult with each other. Every partner has a vote. So you have to do that to get buy-in from City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. And yes, Mr. Christie.
I was frustrated in the 8 years on City Council because I was an at-large member. I could only muster up 5 votes to cut budgets, to save money, and it was frustrating. And the mayor, fortunately, had a good sense of humor, and I would harass him, but I quit being finance chair for the mayor because he wouldn't give me any of these cuts. When it first came out for that amendment, I liked the idea, but I wish it were a majority of City Council that could put it on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Senator. You bet I support it. It's regrettable that we have to have it, but of course I support it. And what I mean by that is when I was chairman of Metro, we had the same leadership style, the same governance structure, which is that the chairman of Metro had absolute power and controlled the agenda. And there was not one single time that I had something from one of my board members that wanted something on the agenda that I said no. Anytime they wanted anything, I put it on the agenda. Why? Because I'd rather discuss it in open session so the people can know what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Yes, Senator, please.
Empower city council members. Remember the environment I've spent my adult life in, the legislature. I never had to ask a speaker or a lieutenant governor permission to introduce a bill or offer an amendment. I want council members to accept some of the responsibility, greater responsibility. I want them to have access to the department heads. I want them to have topics that they will become experts in. If one of them wants to deal with illegal dumping, go study it, come back in 90 days with recommendations and how we're going to pay for it. I could go on and on with the subject matter that they'll be allowed to work with.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Gallegos.
We do have a strong mayor form of government here in the city of Houston. I've worked with 2 mayors, Mayor Parker as well as Mayor Turner. I do support Prop A. I personally wish it was 5 or more council members just to keep the chaos out of City Hall, but I do support it. And I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish working with Mayor Parker as well as Mayor Turner. And you can go to voterobertgallegos.com.
Thank you. And let's go back to our panel for a 9th question.
Councilmember Gallegos, HISD's recent TEA takeover has sparked community concerns. How will you use your mayoral platform to support parents, students, and teachers during this challenging period, even though you lack direct control over the school district?
Exactly. Unfortunately, the mayor of the city of Houston does not have control over HISD, and we do have other school districts within our city boundaries as well. But as the next mayor, what I will be doing is being a voice. Again, 62% of HISD population is Hispanic. So I want to make sure that the superintendent and the TEA provide good quality education for all Houstonians and their kids.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Christie.
I have a reputation of bringing people together, and yes, we don't directly affect HISD, but we can do everything in the world to help these children get a good education. And of course, some of my previous offices dealt with that. So behind the scenes, I went to all the hearings. I had the commissioner on the line. I had the city leaders. I was trying to bring them together. This can help the troubled schools in Houston, but one party would not show up.
Thank you,
but
Mr.
I tried
Christie.
my best.
Any other rebuttals? Mr. Garcia. Sure.
We are where we are now, Houston. Even though Austin has been talking about taking over HISD for many years, ultimately I would meet with the superintendent immediately. I would want to know exactly what does success look like to him. Is it lower truancy? Is it better test scores? Is it a bigger enrollment? At the end of the day, I want to know now, what does success look like? I want to help him get there right away so we can get local control back.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Kaplan.
I actually wrote my thesis on HISD a long time ago. The problems are the same. And we are dreaming if we think the city will get the legislature to do the right thing. Only the private sector will make a difference. And so somebody needs to go to the ConocoPhillips's and ExxonMobil's of the world and the smaller employers, the people who contribute to the office holders in Austin, and tell them to knock it off, because they are screwing the city of Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes,
The Harris
Senator.
County delegation voted for this process. All but 2 members did, because we were concerned about HISD. How HISD goes is how Houston will go. I've met with Mr. Miles. I've explained to him I don't like his style, that we want him out of here as quickly as possible. But I also understand this is about the kids. We had very underperforming schools. We had the FBI going in the administration building on a regular basis. We needed changes, but I've met with Mr. Miles on a Saturday morning. I didn't put out a press release. I didn't protest. I sat down and told him what he needs to do and get out of here.
Thank you. Gentlemen, because we are short on time, we will move to lightning rounds where you will each have 10 seconds to answer rapid fire questions. And for this, we will start from the right, from the senator, and move to the left. So panel, please start with your first lightning round question.
Do vouchers have a place in Houston educational landscape?
No, I voted against it last week. I'll speak against it next week on the Senate floor.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Kaplan.
No.
No.
That was the first question George W. Bush asked me as chairman of the state board. I was for an experimental program, not a blanket voucher program.
Panel, second lightning round question.
Do you support raising the city's revenue cap?
I don't think we can.
Yes,
You asking
please.
me?
Yes, Mr. Whitmire.
For public safety, I would ask for an exception. I think the law allows it now. Why we haven't done it for the last 7 years, I don't understand. You can't ask, it's a 10-second one, I can't talk. No, no until we do a good scrubbing.
All right, Mr. Kaplan.
Yes for public safety, no for other things. For now.
Yep. No, I would not.
I would put it back on the ballot. It'd be up to the voters.
Exception being public safety, yes.
Let's go to our third lightning round question.
What's your top priority for your first 100 days as mayor?
Bringing people together. Unfortunately, this campaign, the way some are running it, are dividing the city. I think we have to make certain that we have everyone be involved in city government.
Mr. Kaplan.
Crime.
Mr. Garcia.
We got to address crime. We got to work with the firefighters. Those are my 2 top issues.
All right.
Crime and infrastructure.
And Mr. Christie.
The city was divided since COVID, bringing people back together. If I can bring TEA and the city back together, if I can bring the city and the county together for the first time, if I can get Sheila Jackson Lee to hug Senator Cruz,
Thank you.
I can bring people together.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Now, with the questions portion of the debate concluded, we invite each candidate to make 45-second closing remarks, and we will start in the reverse order from the opening remarks, which means Senator Whitmire has the floor.
Thank you. I'm very proud of my record as a state senator. Constituent service is our highest priority. I created the Sports Authority, which created so many jobs and protected our sports venues. Passed the Sandra Bland Act, which deals with mental health when you have contact with law enforcement. Passed hate crimes legislation, hold people accountable. So I have a record of accomplishment. That's why Houstonians reached out to me. As been mentioned, I have worked with 9 mayors. I've seen their best practices, and some I've seen their worst practices. I've worked with 7 governors. We have to have someone that can bring all the communities together to make a difference. Certainly public safety will be my highest priority. But before we can address most of the issues we've talked about today, we've got to include everyone. We've got to be inclusive of our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Senator. Lee Kaplan.
Look, most of you don't know me. I've been on the couch before watching candidates, trying to figure out who would do the best for Houston. So if you don't know me, think about the people who do know me. The ones who know that my business has been rated one of the best places to work in Houston. Through scouting, where I've mentored young men for many years, decades. Through my opponents in business disputes, where we have fought a lot and they have ended up my friends. I have 2,400 plus individual contributors, not PACs, not lobbyists, because I have contacted them and they have shown their confidence in me. I am not beholden to anyone and not a fan of lobbyists.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Gilbert Garcia.
Houston, if you're like me, you're frustrated. And we see it in the polls where you think that Houston's heading in the wrong direction. It's time for something different. It's time for a change. It's time to get away from the career politicians. But if you think Houston is working for you, then I'm not your candidate. But if you're looking for someone that's not beholden to anybody, I have no conflicts of interest. My firm and I derive no revenue, no income from the city of Houston, any of the Houston pension funds, any of the entities, the port, metro, you name it, no conflicts of interest, which makes me uniquely qualified to make the tough calls. So if you're looking for someone that's going to shake up City Hall, that's Gilbert Garcia, GarciaForHouston.com. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Councilmember Robert Gallegos.
Out of all the candidates, once again, I'm the one with the experience. We have a strong mayor form of government. I've been a district council member, so I have limited authority. But I have worked with 2 mayors, and I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish, not for just District I, but for the city of Houston. You can go to voterobertgallegos.com. Many of my opponents are sending out nice mailers. They're having TV commercials, claiming they're going to put a lot of police officers on the street, claiming they're going to pick up the illegal dumping, claiming they're going to fix all these leaks that we have, over 500 leaks in the city of Houston. Question is how are they going to pay for it? We've been operating, again, on thin ice with ARPA funding, but that ARPA funding is about to run out. So we're going to have a mayor ready to start operating our city and making sure that we start leading our city in the right direction, and I'm that person, and I'm asking for your vote. Vote Robert Gallegos for mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Jack Christie.
I briefly mentioned my health, education, and welfare of the taxpayer. Health, Mayor Parker put me on the medical advisory board, $17 million in debt. By the time I left 8 years later, there was $26 million in the bank for the city employees to be healthy. I taught them prevention. Education, you know my background, that I've helped the public schools, even though I'm a product of parochial and public schools. And then the welfare of the taxpayer, it's simple. You can't spend more than you got. The taxpayer doesn't need to we don't need to raise taxes. We need to spend properly. And if it's a hiring freeze, if it's cutting budgets, I will get it done. I'm known for that. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Thank you to all of our candidates for taking part in this debate tonight. Early voting begins on Monday, and Election Day is November 7th for you to exercise your right to vote. I would like to thank our panel: Houston Public Media Senior Political Reporter Andrew Schneider, Univision 45 News anchor Marcela Perez-Barros, and the Cougar Editor-in-Chief John Lomax. On behalf of Houston Public Media and Univision and the University of Houston Hobby School of Public Affairs, I'm Christina Yao Lee. Thank you for joining us.